All right. Good morning, y'all, again. Um, for those of you that don't know me, Andrea Carrillo, I'm one of the co-chairs for ELAC. And we're just going to go over real quick some um, virtual meeting protocols. And I will let everybody read those. And then in the meantime as well, if you want to change your screen name to reflect whether you're an ELAC member, a regional advisor, or a member of the public, that would be greatly appreciated. And then we will also do intros in the chat. So if you can put in the chat your name, where you're located, again with your role, and then the icebreaker question today is going to be what's one thing that you've noticed so far this school year that gives you hope for children's learning and growth. We'll put that in the chat as well. And I think for me, I would just say out loud, my oldest is in fifth grade and she's like super giddy and excited to go to school every day, which is a difference from like the end of fourth grade. So I think that makes me hopeful. For anybody that has been trickling in, we're just doing intros in the chat, your name, where you're located, your role, and then the icebreaker question is what's one thing you've noticed so far this school year that gives you hope for children's learning and growth? And then also, if you haven't, if you can change your screen name to reflect whether you're an ELAC member, a regional advisor, or a member of the public. Thanks everyone for engaging and participating. And I will hand it over to Tanya.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tanya Hutton from the Southwest Washington region. If you haven't met me yet, I'm newer to this space. But I would like to welcome you all, and let's take a few minutes to review the last meeting minutes that were sent out in advance, and ask if there's any questions or any opposition to approving those. So I will give you all just a few minutes to look at that. Does anybody need more time with the minutes? Okay, if there isn't any objections, we'll move forward. And now we will review the document feedback loop. And also, to review the state agency partner updates. And then also any regional coalition or the regional coalition update. I apologize. Okay, and to close out this section, unless anybody else needs more time, anybody need more time? Go ahead, raise your hand. We good? Okay, perfect. I like to give time, but it's also awkward silence time, right? So you get a little watching the clock. So to wrap up this time, I would like ELAC members to just give me a thumbs up to vote on the minutes that you all reviewed. Perfect. Thank you all, and I will pass this back to Marlene.
Good morning, everyone. Marlene White here, Community Engagement Manager for here at DCYF. And I just wanted to call out a really quick update on the state agency partner updates. There are updates around trauma-informed care financial awards and the complex needs training from the UW. I'm going to say this wrong. Is it Hearing Center or Hearing Center? But yeah, I just want to call those out because these are great resources for providers. If you didn't take a look at that, please share those widely. So I'm here to give you a couple updates on the FSKA report and then also a quick update on the 2026 work plan for ELAC. So FSKA report is the first one. As you know, ELAC, our council through the legislature, is tasked with writing a report on the FSK, which is Fair Start for Kids Act law. And so basically what we do is we come together and we send a set of recommendations to the legislature and the governor around the FSK efforts. So my update is that the report is in its final draft and it's in our internal approval process. So it will be sent to the legislature very soon. I think the last time I saw it was sitting, or our deputy director, Emily Morgan, had approved it internally here, and then it'll go to our boss, our director here in the Office of Public Affairs. I believe we're going to be sharing the report in the chat if you're curious, if you want to review it. But what I wanted to bring up today is planning for the next report, for the 2026 report. So we can move to the next slide. Yes, so if you remember, I know there's been a lot of transitions here in ELAC. We get new members constantly, and every 2 years we get new members. So if you're new here, for this last report, the current one, 2025, what we did here in CE is worked really alongside our early learning division to outline priority areas for the report to align it with the living and wage access work. So we did have several meetings around the 3 specific goals and just aligning those efforts with the efforts currently that we're doing internally here. So I just wanted to bring these up for you to see and to remind you, because as we build out the recommendations for the 2026 report, we just want to hear from you if there are any categories or recommendations from this current report that you'd like to prioritize for the 2026 report. And I mean, just given our budget realities, it might be a very short report. You've probably heard that, you know, government is experiencing a budget deficit. So we're definitely going to be taking that in mind as we build this. So it might be a short one, but let me share. Oh, Jessica has already shared in the chat. So we are going to be following up with members with this survey, but if you have a couple minutes right now, or if you want to just open it up and keep it on your tabs, we really want to hear from members on the 3 goals and what your priorities are as we continue to build, as we start to build the 2026 report. I don't know if Nicole is here or if she has anything to add that she might want to add. And I don't see she's here. Does anyone have any questions on the report or what we're asking from all of you guys? All right. Okay, let me see. See, there's a question from Lois. Oh, that's a really good question. That is a really great question. And I'm curious if the staff from the staff qualifications are here and might be able to take a stab at this. I know Diana is working on the living wage work, and I'm curious what the intersections are between that work and the work group. Yeah, I'm curious. I don't know if anybody has an answer here internally. If not, we can definitely take this back to our teams and get this answer back through the feedback loop, Lois.
Hey, Marlene, I can respond. Thanks, Lois, for your question. As you identified, has been established, and the work that's happening there does align with the access and living wage roadmap that we have for early learning. So we will just make sure that as we're moving forward, that there's alignment between both. And then as Gretchen and Tiffany provide updates over time, we can definitely make those connections to the access and living wage work if that is helpful to see the visual connections as both sides of that work progresses.
Thank you, Diana. Any more questions on that specific update around the FSK report? Okay, yeah, I just read Renee's comment in the chat. Yeah, that's very unfortunate to hear that. Yeah, and I mean, given our budget realities, this report is probably going to be very short and succinct. Yeah, due to what's happening with everything. Elizabeth has a question on the deadline. We're going to keep it open. This is really feedback to help with the 2026 report, and we're just in October now. So we will have upcoming sessions during ELAC meetings I know last year we had like standalone report development sessions. I'm going to try and embed any FSK report building sessions into ELAC meetings, so we're not having to have those standalone meetings. So we're going to keep it open. We're going to send it out, and we'll continue drafting and working on that 2026 report as we continue meeting through ELAC meetings in 2026. Okay, hold on, my chat. Okay, I think they were all answered. The last quick update I wanted to provide is, yeah, it's already October, the new year is upon us, and we usually work on a work plan. Us members, alongside with our DCYF internal staff, work together on a work plan to kind of really prioritize what's coming up for you around the early childhood education field. So today, I just, as we continue working on that work plan, I want to hear from you to help us shape that. And I think Jessica's about to put a link in the chat. We really want to hear from you if there's any specific topics you want to focus on in 2026. Are there emerging issues that you want to bring up? And also, I'm also curious to hear from you about the logistical, how we shape our meetings. Do you like presentations? Do you like panel discussions? We have a new ELAC, we have a new chair, ELAC co-chairs here, and that's exciting because, they're bringing up really great questions, and this is a question for all ELAC members. What's working well? What is not? What do you want to see? And how can we improve in 2026? And I'm looking at Dr. Brian Knowles. I know you're nodding, but I'm thinking about you because we're going to be doing a co-presentation with both internal staff, our co-chair, Dr. Brian Knowles, and external partners in that December meeting around mental health efforts. So that's going to be one of the first co-presentations that we're going to be doing. And that'll be exciting to see as we continue, having these meetings in 2026. I really want to hear from members. What do you want to prioritize? How do you want to see this information? How do you want to engage with DCYF and the content around early childhood education? So yeah, that one is a little longer, so definitely keep it open in your tabs, and you're probably going to have to go back to it. We have 7 questions. They're all optional, so if one of them really speaks to you, definitely expand on it. But we will be following up with everyone with these 2 asks. And for some reason, when we do follow-ups and we ask people to respond to our request, it doesn't happen. So I'm just reminding you here verbally, we will be following up with these 2 links, and we would love it if you followed up. We really want to hear from you. So yeah, those are my 2 updates. Does anyone have any questions or comments on them? All right, well, if not, I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Brian Knowles, who's going to be introducing our next presenters. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Marlene. Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Brian Knowles. I'm going to be introducing presenters Gresham and Brett, who's going to discuss staff qualifications. As a reminder, during the presentation, please type your questions or comments into the chat box. Once the presentation is over, we will answer all typed questions as well as open up for any additional ones. So we're going to welcome Gresham, who is the Workforce Support Manager, and Brett, who's the Child Care Policy Manager. They will provide an update on staff qualifications work per House Bill 1648. House Bill 1648 tasks DCYF to extend the timeline for completion of staff requirement and establish staff qualifications, work groups to help improve qualifications requirement for child care providers. Members will receive an update on the establishment of this work group. general staff qualifications updates, and next steps. As a final reminder, share your feedback via the meeting reflection survey that is in the link and was provided earlier. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Gretchen and Brett.
Good morning. Thank you, Dr. Knowles. Appreciate the warm welcome from everyone. As he said, my name is Gretchen Starr-Brunig, and I am the Workforce Supports Manager in the Early Learning Division, and I'm here co-presenting with my colleague, Brett. Brett, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Brian. Brian covered everything, so we can just go. My name is Brett Skinner, and I do childcare policy. So yeah, excited to have some time and space and connect with you all. So just appreciate it.
So next slide, please. So we're here, as we will be here every meeting, to share with you an update on this important legislative work group. And so as generally, we will provide you what the core elements and the work plan status are. And then Brett.
We'll also talk about the kickoff meeting reflections that we just went through the first meeting. And, again, we always want these to be two-way communications where we're getting feedback. We don't want it to just be us talking at the group. So we're going to continue to iterate that throughout all these meetings to try to find better ways to do that.
All right. So next slide, please. So the work group, which is a result of 1648, is designed to serve in advisory capacity to make recommendations to DCYF on certain required topics. And the work group members will come together monthly to consider research and community input to shape their recommendations. And the tasks are to streamline and clarify rules and policies, to define the criteria and methods to honor equivalent out-of-state education and training and adding experience, and to identify the options to offer the community-based training pathway or PACE in an online format. Next slide, please. So the scope of work includes not only the monthly meetings with the work group to prepare the recommendations, but also our engagement with you and with the other two advisory groups, the Provider Support Subcommittee and the Indian Policy for Early Learning. It's really an important element of this work that we synthesize your feedback for the DCYF Steering Committee, and then use all of the recommendations and feedback in the development of revised rules to extend the timeline and to make the necessary changes to implement work group recommendations after the final report. So the final report, as a reminder, is due to the legislature by December 1, but it will start in its internal processes at DCYF at the end of September. So that's the scope of work. Next slide, please. And as another reminder of the core elements of the bill, it's really two main functions, which is extending the timeline for all staff qualifications to August 1 of 2030, and then establishing this work group. Those are the two basic elements of the bill, with the final report due by the 26th. I'm sorry, December 1st of 2026. All right, next slide, please. So we have exciting news that we received authorization for use of the Preschool Development Grant federal money, and we're able to contract with a very seasoned facilitator whom many of you are familiar with. Her name is Jennifer Jennings Schaefer, and she has facilitated other legislative work groups, including the cost of care and access to living wage, and she will also be responsible for writing the report. So she just came on board right before the first meeting, and we're in the process of onboarding with her now, and preparing for the monthly meetings to come. So we also created a web page that's on our community engagement, and in just a second, I will put the link to that web page in our chat. This is where everyone can go from the public to see the public meeting minutes from the work groups, the recommendations, all of the meeting materials, all the resources will be published there. We also identified the membership. Hang on just a second. I'm so sorry. You will see in just a minute the members of the work group, and we will be posting the list of the roster of the members on that web page. And then, as I noted, we also had our first meeting. So the first meeting was really intended to start building relationships and to share the process for making recommendations and to introduce our community agreements so that we can plan how we're going to work together. We also sent out invitations for 3-hour virtual meetings for this fall, and then starting in January, it will be on the, I think the third Thursday of every month that the work group will be meeting. All right, next slide, please. Brett?
Yep. All right. So I want you to kind of take a look at the work group members. So we have a couple of different types of groups of work group members that we're going to talk about. So you're the first group that has had an opportunity to look at the members. We wanted to make sure we talked to all the members and made sure everything was okay with them before we were letting everybody know. But these members will, as Gretchen just said, will be put on the website so that there's just transparency and you can kind of see the perspectives involved. There was a lot of work. There was a lot of design and intention and back and forth and feedback around how do we construct this work group to provide perspective and balance and diversity through all the different ways in which that can show up in a work group. So we got some feedback from this group, from our other two groups around this, and we had for our provider section, we had an opportunity for people to volunteer. So we had 55 people raise their hand and volunteer to participate in this work group. And so we looked at all the elements. We had, spreadsheets that showed all these different elements of where people fit onto the map, and as well as meeting the legislative requirements. The work group's membership is 55% active members of the workforce. So we're going to make sure that we have people that are, in the field understanding what's happening. Members were chosen to reflect all the regions of Washington, ensuring the group accounts for urban, suburban, rural communities. We also wanted to make sure that we were getting all the different provider types so that we know the different realities of our early learning providers and different things that are going on. It's very easy to focus on our own world and our own challenges, and those are all really valid. But we want to make sure that we are giving voice to different groups, to different things, to different concerns, and that we have that voice at the table to continue to bring that together because, we may create a broad rule that fits a lot of people, but we may need to build in some exceptions that are hitting those different needs. And a lot of times we need to be able to hear those voices, see those voices to help do that. So we have open, we have certified for payment only, tribal representation within those. We have different capacity sizes. So we have small, we have large centers, we have school age, we have family home, we have different languages represented, so that we are having English, Spanish, Somali, that we can get those different perspectives coming in as we do this work. Continue to keep those things centered in the work that we're doing. So we just wanted to take a look and make sure that we, thank these members as well. As you all are showing up to this group, it takes extra effort, it takes energy, it takes, your mental capacity, the mental load. So I just appreciate everybody who's shown up to this meeting, but also the members who also, raise their hand to work in this group. If you want to go to the next slide. So the second part of this bill was 10 organizations that were sort of named in the bill. And so you can take a look at the individuals that are representing these groups. And it's just really exciting and fun to see the different places that are represented. And even in the first meeting, it was really fun to hear people's why, hear the perspective that people are bringing to the table. The different ways in which people care about early learning, that people care about childcare, that people care about getting this work done. So that was really exciting. So again, applauding these individuals and these organizations for participating. And then also they're going to have an ability to have some alternates if they're not able to attend. And so there's going to be some more communication going out to these groups in terms of how they can do that. And we can go to the next slide. And okay, sorry, my slides are a little bit differently organized. Okay, so we did have the first meeting, which I was kind of already touching on. And a couple of I guess some of the perspective I can share is we were in this first meeting, we were talking a lot about the community, about the agreements, how we're going to come together, about how the work might flow. And so we weren't really diving into the qualifications or into some of the rules per se, but we were having an opportunity to build relationships and let people understand the space in which we're working and kind of like what's happening. Because it is a vulnerable space. It takes time to kind of understand what we're doing and how we're working through it. And we want to make sure that we're taking some time to touch on that. So we did receive some feedback about wanting our community agreements to be a living document, that we can make changes to these, that we can change things as we go forward. And then engaging the work group in planning monthly meetings, co-presenting updates at these meetings. And then we also wanted to talk about the transparency in DCYF's role. At the meeting, there were a lot of DCYF staff that were present, along with the other 20 members that we just showed. And so some of it we're talking through. We have different people that are working different roles. So we have some people that are taking notes, some people that are helping facilitate. We have some people that are there to grab information, grab rules. Um, but we wanted to kind of make it really transparent that, the DSWAF staff are not voting. The work group is about the members that are there. But we do need to make sure that we're getting the information written down. We're helping support those conversations. And it's not our job. Well, it's not our job to just sort of say, here's what we're doing or not, but we are going to sort of raise our hand and talk about guardrails and talk about things that could be problematic, or if there's anything that a path we may not be able to go down for whatever reason. So we can go to the next slide. Okay, so this is a fun graphic just to reiterate. I think we kind of showed this last time a little bit, but how this is going to sort of function in terms of the staff qualifications work group is going to, work with our different D2AF advisory groups, including this one, and that we are going to continue to bring the information from the work group to these meetings, and that process, it's just going to keep happening after we have the monthly meeting. We're going to bring the information that we go over here, and then I that we also have a DSREP executive steering committee, and they're going to continue to look at the information that's going along to provide any feedback or to provide that. And so we're going to use the information we get from the feedback from this group, from the work group to kind of work all together, in connection. And then I think there should be one more slide that looks kind of similar to this one. And really it's just reiterating that Gretchen pointed out that around September of this next year, we're going to be getting those recommendations all sort of wrapped up into a report with recommendations in terms of changes that we want to make, potentially WAC changes, policy changes, and sending those forward. And that once we get that, that's going to go through the advisory groups, including this one, and then that will also go through the D2F steering committee and the sponsors. And so we just wanted to make sure that we were being transparent about the different handoffs and the different ways that we're going to try to reiterate and work through this as we go through here. So that there's no surprises, that we're all on the same page and we can ask better questions. And I have been doing a terrible job looking at the chat, sorry.
You've been doing a great job.
Okay, did we want to look at the chat or do we want to go to finish with the slides?
Let's finish with the slides because I'd like to hear from people in addition to the chat.
Okay, let's go to the next slide then. Okay. So again, we want to make sure that we find the ways in which feedback works for you all. And so we are going to continue to sort of ask for that. We did want to talk a little bit about the difference between the different groups. So the work group members volunteered and were appointed to represent the workforce and engage in making the recommendations. And that sort of advisory capacity is limited. They're going to look at data, research, lived experiences, deliberate, and vote on recommendations on the required topics. So that's sort of like their role within the work group. And then this group here is going to advise with the broader perspective on how the recommendations could impact the entire system, right? So there could be a tunnel vision happening within the work group, and we want to continue to bring that to this group and take a broader lens and bring your perspective to the work as well. So we just kind of wanted to talk about that, the differences there. And then on the screen, we have some thoughts. We could do surveys, we could do presentations, there could be a panel, the synthesis of themes and rationale for recommendations. One of the groups had said, kind of sending out some of the materials that then could be given feedback during this meeting. So we're looking at something around that. But really, we do want to hear if anyone has any suggestions or want to put in chat or raise their hand, ways in which you would like to get the information from the work group or provide feedback on it. So feel free to write anything in or raise your hand or just speak.
So I would like to go to the chat because Representative Josh Penner, thank you so much for adding this in. And I think this is a really great example of ways that we would like to be able to lean in together to reflect the greater diversity of the early childhood educator workforce. So to engage disability focused organizations or inclusive early learning programs for input. I love this idea, and I would love to think together creative ways of making, possibilities for panel members or others to come into ELAC meetings and help with some of these very really important topics that may not come up in the work group itself. Did you want to add anything?
Um, I want to add thanks for pulling this work group together. I'm not the prime sponsor of this bill. I see I'm signed on to it, but had I been more aware earlier on, I think I would have tried to incorporate this into the requirements. And I'm happy that the ideas found fertile ground here. I know the legislation says at a minimum certain standards will be met. I see that those are exceeded already with this plan. So thank you for that. I'm hoping that as part of the conversation, this fulfills the beyond the at a minimum as well, because there's a substantial amount of children of all ages who are obviously disabled or discovering disabilities too. I think is a big part of it, and the provider spectrum is all over the place. And I think as we're trying to do this inward facing look at what requirements might look like in the next 5-10 years for these providers, this is a big area that there's a lot of different directions you could go. So I look forward to hearing more than I'm going to say about this topic, because I still want to be a student and figure out what it is I don't know. So thank you.
So just to kind of continue some of the conversation, thank you, Lois, for raising the questions in the chat. So just a note to follow up on what Representative Penner just said, we did aim to go above and beyond, and that was in a direct response to feedback we heard in the Provider Supports Committee to make sure that we had commensurate representation of programs, licensees with the other state representatives. And so we have, as a result, 55% of the membership of the work group are licensed program representatives, with the majority, and we have slides, as Marlene indicated, that we have presented in prior sessions that we're happy to bring forward as part of the responses. Any other thoughts on ways that you would like to be engaged, of what's worked well in the past, and of creative ideas that you have to partner with us?
Gretchen, this is Susan, and I just wanted to make the other point as a provider that is directly impacted when recruiting and retaining employees by the staff education requirements, that the work of this group is to, I think, remove barriers to that recruitment. And because what I'm looking for in the field are people who not only have the desire to do it, but the willingness to learn and the willingness to stay in the field. And so what I would caution us to do is to begin diluting what our focus is by trying to broaden the scope of the work in some regards. And I think, to Rep. Penner's point, the more we look at how these qualifications impact the people working in the field, and then the types of trainings that we provide to be able to assist them to do work and better work with kids of varying abilities, that's more to the betterment of everyone involved, because childcare is really, really hard. And there isn't a lot of great training out there. The Herring Center is a great resource, but they're one resource. And so the more we can build on this, but also remove the barriers to people being able to enter or stay in the field, which is what this group is about, is I think the first layer of defense that we provide to keep and build a thriving childcare sector. So that was just the point that I wanted to try to bring into the conversation.
Laura, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to find out if if the work group is going to be doing some field work, like going out to centers to actually see how they operate, to look at staff with and without degrees and talk to, employees in the field. I have a center that's rated 5. And I only received 2 points for professional development, but my staff are very well trained. And our training doesn't come from the typical college, but instead we use the FINE program. We have good coaching staff. I internally have mental health supports that come in, behavioral therapists that work with my staff. And many of my staff that are going to school find that they aren't learning anything because they're relearning what I've already taught them. And so I think we need to think about a good quality center that's rated at 5 should be able to train their own staff. And I've also hired people with a degree, and it takes me the same amount of time to train them. I don't just hire them and throw them in a classroom. Just because they have the education component doesn't mean they have the experience component. So I just wanted to mention that. And we need to be able to pay and retain staff if we're going to make them educated. So the staff that I have that are going to college, they're not even going to be working for me when they're done, because I can't afford in Region 2, where I receive low subsidy rates, to be able to pay them what they're worth. So that's just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Hi, Laura. I want to thank you so much for that comment that you make, and I completely appreciate where you're coming from. Congratulations on your level 5 facility and early achievers. That is truly an extraordinary mark of quality. So I'm very grateful. And it's also, what you're saying is very validating, that the supports and services we have in professional development are effective. And so that's also really great to hear, Laura. So I really appreciate this comment. And I think we are going to be thinking very shortly with the work group about how we do incorporate those voices. And I think we have some of our members who, just like you, have similar experiences with both the higher education pathway and also with the training pathway. We know that there's lots of different ways that we can gain a firm command of these practices, these wonderful practices. And so I think you're really highlighting something that we'll be considering as a work group. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I just Laura, that was amazing. I love the details in which you brought forward your points. And I want you to continue to hold that, not hold that, but as we bring up topics and we bring stuff, bring those thoughts, bring those solutions to the conversation, continue to bring those forward. Because that's what we need. We need, like, the work group has a bunch of different people, hopefully with a lot of different perspectives, but this group right here, you're in this group. And so we if we're missing that, we need to continue to hear your voice in the nuance of what the group does. And I like your ideas. We don't really have anything built in for the work group per se to, like, go out to visit places, but it's an interesting idea. And if not, nothing less, like, it makes me want to interview you based on the things you were just saying. So I just appreciate you speaking up.
I'm happy to. I even have staff letters, testimonies that they wrote on this bill. You know, the mental stress they endure going to school on top of working full time, for little return, is saddening, you know. And so the turnover that we're going to create, with kids that really need the longevity of the teachers, is problematic. And in my area especially, I can't even pay the teachers what they need to be paid, right? But I do have long-term staff that are staying with me, because they're getting supported in their job roles where they are. So thank you.
I allow for a long pause. I just wonder if there's anyone else that wants to bring forward some thoughts about engagement and ways of getting engaged with the work group.
Gretchen, did you see Lois's questions about the alternates?
Yes, and Lois, thanks for bringing that forward. That will be a topic that comes up in the next work group meeting. I'm going to allow some space in case others from DCYF want to add in here.
Hi, Lois. Great question. Providers are able to select their alternate. As for attendance of alternates on a consistent basis, just like Gretchen had mentioned, that's something that we're going to visit as a work group together in our very next meeting, I think, so that we can ensure that everyone's voice is heard every time we meet.
And Courtney said, I think having the reports in advance of ELAC meeting so we have time to formulate questions that get answered during ELAC call versus the following meeting or feedback loops so there could be more discussion in ELAC versus reacting to info for the first time. Yep, that makes a lot of sense, Courtney. Yeah, I mean, just we were talking about neurodivergence, we're talking about our ability to process this, like I having something visually and having even 15 minutes to kind of process it on my own, it can make a huge difference in terms of the way I overthink things. So, appreciate the comment. Renee said, our organization, Martha and Mary, currently has approximately 20 staff members at various phases of the EA grant to take their ECE credits at Olympic College. I agree with Laura as far as the college credits are not the only metric formula of success, but we will say our staff who have taken those credits and the discussions they are having with other student staff and us throughout have improved their practice in combination with in-center trainings and experiences, and directors holding staff accountable to quality expectations. Most of our staff take pride in getting those credits. We don't typically lose staff after they obtain their initial/short. When they go back on to the bachelor's program through Western Washington University, we do tend to lose them to school districts. We're a not-for-profit in Kitsap. Yeah, good perspective. And Susie said there are assumptions that teachers are not paid well in the early learning space, and that may be true overall, but in private schools, most teachers receive pay and benefits on the same scale as the K-12 teachers. And I think, I mean, I just appreciate this because it's it's a microcosm of the balance in which these conversations are going to go into this and how do we how do we craft something that is going to be helpful for everybody because we are in different circumstances and we do have different supports and different scenarios. So it's fantastic comments.
I just want to follow up on Colleen's suggestion. Colleen, thank you so much for coming forward. But suggesting public virtual listening sessions for providers to give input is an excellent, excellent idea. And I would love, we will be bringing forward all of these ideas to the work group in the next meeting, for ways for the work group members to get engaged. In hearing from the provider, the larger provider voice. So I love this idea. Thank you so much. Also, thank you so much for the last comment here, about scholarships. This is something that we are actively researching, and I really appreciate your bringing that forward, Bob. Thank you. Is there anything else that we can answer, or ideas that you have that you would like to bring forward? I think we can go to the next slide, hearing none. Just a huge thank you for your active participation in this topic and your support of the work group members, many of whom are here today, as we continue with these monthly meetings and engage in these feedback loop cycles. So thank you very, very much for hosting us today.
Thank you, and thank you again, Gretchen and Brad. That was really good. And I think just to kind of add, having provider services within, the meeting space moving forward, I think is going to also be beneficial. But thank you all for your feedback and questions. And I'm going to pass it to Hannah.
Thank you, Brian. I also just want to echo you in thanking Brett and Gretchen for sharing that information on the work group, and supporting this conversation. I think it's highly valuable. So we're going to move into our next section here. And as we do, I just want to offer a reminder that during the presentation, you're going to have opportunities to put your questions and comments in the chat box. And then once the presentation is over, you'll be able to address those questions and answer with open-ended conversations as well. So I'd like to welcome Matt Judge, the Federal Initiatives and Collaboration Administrator, who will be providing an update on the 2025 Cost of Quality Care and Market Rate Survey that was released on October 1st. It's going to include in his discussion the purpose, how providers have provided input directly that impacted the child care subsidy rates, and how provider testing feedback shaped changes to the survey. So welcome, Matt.
Hannah, I actually don't think Matt is here. We are running really ahead of schedule. So I say we take a break, and when we come back, I'm going to make everybody fill out that reflection survey. So let's take a break and be back in 15 minutes. How does that sound?
That sounds great. When you get back, I'll welcome Matt again. Hello, everyone. Welcome back from break. Hopefully you all got a chance to enjoy grabbing a snack or getting a beverage, and I did. Take a little breather. Just a reminder as we move forward that our presentation is going to allow us to ask questions and put our comments into the chat box so that once the presentation is over, we will have opportunities to answer those questions as well as opening up for additional questions from the presenter. And we would like to welcome Matt Judge, who is our Federal Initiative Collaboration Administrator. He's going to be providing an update on the 2025 Cost of Quality Care and Market Rate Survey that was released on October 1st. This presentation is going to include the purpose, how provider input directly impacted the child care subsidy rates, and how provider testing feedback can shape changes to the survey. Welcome, Matt.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the introductions. My name's Matt. I oversee the Child Care and Development Fund grant, so that's why I'm presenting to you on this topic, because part of those federal funds pay for the Working Connections child care subsidy payments to providers. And so the market rate and cost of quality care survey is my responsibility. On the next slide, I'll walk us through what I'll talk about here. So I have been in front of ELAC once before for this survey and gave you some background, but want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So I'll summarize that again here as well. And then I'll talk a bit about some of the feedback loops that ELAC has provided and provider supports provided with questions and comments, and let you know the follow-up on that, so that you have that information. And then you might be aware that some providers recommended by some of the DCYF advisory bodies tested the survey that we're about to discuss and provided some helpful feedback, and we've made some changes on the basis of that feedback. And then finally, I'll let you know where we're at in our timeline and what some of the next steps are for this survey. So on the next slide, I'll get into a bit of the why and why this is important and how we distinguish these two sides of the survey. So under federal rules for the Child Care and Development Fund, states are required to conduct either a market rate survey or an alternative method, and then create their subsidy base rates using either that market rate survey or an alternative methodology. The legislature put it into law that we base our subsidy base rates on the market rate. And so what that means is that we ask providers, licensed and certified providers, what they charge in the private market, and then have to establish a subsidy base rate that's competitive with that rate, so that providers aren't disincentivized from serving children who receive subsidies. However, we know that the market rate isn't functioning healthily. Families can't afford to pay providers what it would actually cost to operate their programs the way they want to and pay their staff a living wage. So several states and jurisdictions, including Washington, have been pursuing having the ability to base our rate on what providers tell us it actually costs them to do their work, which would essentially mean higher subsidy rates than the market rate can afford. So this survey allows Washington to adopt either approach. We've received federal approval to use an alternative methodology of basing these subsidy rates on the cost of quality care. But currently the legislature says that we do it according to the market rate. This survey that we're doing right now gives us the ability to go either way, depending on what the legislature tells us. So we'll ask providers across the state, what is their rate for all the different age children? And that'll vary by provider type and geographic region. And then we'll also gather data about what it costs them to do their work, and vary that by child age and region as well. Next slide, please. So for either of these studies, like I said, we have to vary this by geography and age of child. We also need to ask providers questions about whether they accept childcare subsidies and if they're experiencing any barriers from doing that. And then for the cost of quality care side, we need to analyze what it costs to meet health and safety requirements, any quality and staffing requirements, and the cost of higher quality care. In the past, we've done this survey every 3 years. Under Senate Bill 572, the legislature passed this last session. We're doing this every other year, and they required that we have a report on a new survey out June 2026. So that's the timeline we're on. Next slide, please. This is just I'll skim over this pretty quickly, but just the point here is to say that when we determine cost of quality care, DCYF doesn't just come up with that on their own. We asked a diverse group of providers, family homes, centers, tribal programs, what do they think should be the baseline assumption around what cost of quality means? They told us, most importantly, that it means you have to have a subsidy base rate that would support living wage and benefits for the staff in those programs, meaning if every child were on subsidy in a program, the subsidy base rate should be sufficient on its own to support living wage for the staff. They also want it to support family engagement time. You need extra staff so that there's time for parent conferences, and they want planning and release time to be really strong so that teachers can plan their classrooms. That requires additional staff, really effective materials and curriculum, and then time for staff to engage in professional development. So all that to say that when we have the way we have a cost of quality care model in Washington State makes some really strong assumptions about what that should be able to support based on what providers told us. Next slide, please. So we have, based on that, a model for cost of quality care that really takes into consideration these three things. In the gray, there are non-personnel costs like rent, mortgage, utilities, all the overhead. Then in the purple here, there's the biggest cost, the staff. That includes their benefits, their pay, all of those pieces. And then there are all the quality enhancements. That might be things like professional development, curriculum, planning and release time, et cetera. So we know based on what the providers told us, they want to assume about the personnel costs. And we know what they want to assume in terms of quality enhancements. So what this survey does really is zoom in on that gray part and ask what do people have to pay out there for their rent, mortgage, utilities, insurance costs, things like that. So that's what this portion of this study will focus on. Next slide, please. So major priorities. We know we're doing two sides of provider payment, or two different ways of looking at provider payment. And that means we're collecting more data. The more time that's required for a provider to finish this study, the fewer providers participate. The fewer providers who participate, the more likely that there's going to be data, anomalies, and that base rates might not reflect what people's realities are. So it's really, really important that we streamline the study so that staff and providers can complete it as quickly as possible. So that's been the major priority, to try to get response rate up by making it easier to finish, by cutting out anything that's not absolutely necessary to determine those subsidy rates. We also really want to focus in on getting more school-age providers. In past surveys, we've had some technical issues that sort of prevented or made barriers to their completing it. So we're really working on addressing that. And just removing anything that is extraneous to coming up with base rates based on market rate or the cost of quality care based on the early educator design team, those providers, what they recommended. Removing any non-required data gathering, and then just clarifying the final report that'll come out in June. And streamlining the survey itself helps to do that as well. On the next slide, I think we're going to get into some of the feedback loops that have happened. I presented some similar things about this survey at Provider Supports, and they had questions. One of them was, why are the rates for family homes so low? This is the quote from the, I think the provider who was asking, even though we participate in all DCYF surveys. So just one important thing to remember, licensed family home rates are based on what's negotiated in collective bargaining between SEIU 925 and DCYF. And then once that bargaining is concluded, the legislature ratifies the collective bargaining agreement. The negotiations are based on the market rate survey. So all that to say that the survey does inform the rates just the way it does for center providers, and that the current rates that are established are based on what the providers, licensed family homes, tell us they charge in the private market. The way things are set right now, the licensed family home rate is set so that it is higher than the vast majority of rates that the providers themselves are charging in the private market, so that subsidy rate is extremely competitive and hopefully isn't so much of a barrier to providers participating in subsidy. Of course, like I just alluded to, an individual provider's rates might differ from what they see in the subsidy base rates, because we're surveying all the providers in a region and asking them their rates. And there will be some that are very, very low compared to others, some that are very high, and then some that are clumped in the middle. And any given provider might be any place along that continuum. So all that to say, the rates are based on market rates for family homes and centers. Next slide, please. So this group, ELAC, had some feedback loop questions or comments as well. Are license exempt programs part of this survey? No, except that providers on tribal lands, they are technically license exempt because DCYF doesn't have jurisdiction on tribal lands, but they consent, the tribal nation does, to DCYF licensors coming on their lands and certifying that the programs, if they were subject to DCYF's jurisdiction, would meet licensing standards. And by doing that, those programs are able to receive the state's Working Connections child care subsidy payments for eligible families that participate in those programs. So we also survey those programs and ask them what rates they're charging in the private market and what their overhead costs are too. You may have heard of certified for payment only. That's where a tribal nation does its own licensing for those programs, and through that, the program can receive subsidy payments. We don't survey those programs because their model may differ pretty substantially from licensed programs on state lands. Then there was a question, can you elaborate on the requirements? These are the federal requirements around rate setting. So this is correct. Currently, we are using the 2021 market rate survey to set provider rates in centers, whereas licensed family home rates are currently based on the 2024 market rate survey. The 2024 market rate survey showed increases in market rates. So therefore, centers in that sense are lagging behind. The legislature has put into law that center rates will go to the 2024 market rate survey July 2026. So that means that, yes, we are technically out of compliance right now with federal requirements, because federal requirements say that rates need to be based on the most recent market rate survey or alternative methodology. So no consequence so far to being out of compliance, but there always could be. But we will get into compliance in July next year. So I think that's it for the feedback loop pieces. Next slide. Just to follow up, though, on what this means for centers, on the left-hand side here, you can see the current rates based on the 2021 market rate survey And then on the right, you can see what they will go to July 1st, 2026. And at the bottom of each of these charts, on the bottom of the left-hand chart, you can see the total cost per year for these rates, and then the cost every 2 years. And then on the right-hand side at the bottom, you can see the cost in addition to that of going to the higher rates in 2026. So I'll pause just a second so you have a chance to look at that and see if there are any questions. Yeah, thanks. Susie asked, some school aid rates are going down. That is true. So it used to be that we had a policy called hold harmless, meaning no rate would ever go down, even if survey data was telling us that in certain areas market rates had gone down for whatever reason. The legislature, though, has elected to not continue hold harmless. And so that means that in a couple cases where the data showed us that market rates have gone down, that the rate will go down in that area. So that's correct. And so, that might highlight as well how important it is to get lots of response, especially in lower population areas. If we only hear from a couple providers in a really rural area with only a few providers, and either the rate information provided is inaccurate or just not representative of the other providers there, then that can suggest that there are market rates there that aren't as true to the reality of the majority of providers responding or providers working in that area. Next slide, please. There's another question from Million in the chat. So both the 2024 survey and this survey ask providers to provide data that would support either a market rate based approach, meaning we ask them what rates they charge in the private market, and then we can set subsidy rates based on that. But we also ask questions that gather data that would allow us to base rates on the cost of providing care. The legislature has said that we will do it based on the market rate, but we have federal approval to switch to a cost of quality care model whenever the state, the legislature decides to do that. So if in the next legislative session, the legislature wanted to switch to cost of quality care, we will have completed a survey that would support that. So hopefully that's clear. What's most likely to happen is that we will continue to use the market rate side. Because the budget is probably looking like it would best support that. Another bit of feedback loop or follow-up to do here. We really appreciate the providers who step forward to test this survey and provide suggestions on how to make it better, more understandable, more rational in some cases. There were let's see, 5 major categories of comments that we received. I think there were about 10 providers that provided lengthy feedback to the test survey. A major one was that for family homes, we kept referring to classrooms, mirroring what we do in centers. There are different sections of the survey for different provider types. So classrooms obviously doesn't make sense for licensed family homes. So when we ask about like staff pay by classroom, that doesn't make any sense for a licensed family home model. So based on those comments, we revised whole sections and questions to fix that. There was also a section, there are sections where we ask, what are providers currently paying their staff so that we can compare that to what the living wage assumption is. But sometimes staff are paid on different timescales. It might be an annual salary, it might be an hourly wage or something in between that. So we just revised that language based on comments to make it clearer that you could enter whatever you're doing, and then we will make a conversion so that everything is compared apples to apples. So that was helpful feedback. We also we provide opportunity to talk about different kinds of staff and what they're being paid. And then we provide some other categories. And it was not clear what how folks were going to respond if they had several different types that were others that weren't accounted for in the pre-selected categories. So we added some spaces to add to talk about staff that didn't meet the standard types, and then provided more clarity on how to fill their wages out. There are questions about the cost per square foot for rent and other pieces. We clarified that language and really broke the question out in two spots, or into two questions, to address the comments that the question wasn't clear. And then there were lots of individual comments about how we could make the language more plain talk or more reflective of the kind of language that providers use to talk about their programs themselves, so that the survey is more readable and understandable. So there are 5 major categories, but there are like lots of different revisions that went into each of these. So I think hopefully folks will see that there were changes from what they originally saw in the test compared to the final version that went out. Next slide, please. The last survey that went out, we were really excited to offer a $100 stipend, and we were hoping to do the same this time, but the legislature, because of the shortfall, didn't appropriate additional funds to do this survey, even though they're requiring it on a more frequent basis. So that will mean we do need to decrease the incentive. Still appreciate being able to offer one, and it's just a token of respect for providers that are spending, that do such important work, and this is just one additional thing that's taking up time in their day. So we respect that, and we're offering as much as we can based on our budget. If I have it said in the past that we weren't surveying certified providers, I hope it's clear based on what I was saying earlier that we do. Certified providers on tribal lands have licensors come out, and so they operate very similarly to licensed programs, and they're paid subsidy-based rates. So we do survey those and have in the past as well. So just want to clarify that. Next slide. So these are the timelines involved. DCYF sent out on its listserv a message just hopefully priming providers for receiving this survey, saying it was going to come out in a couple of days. And then, of course, our licensing division was notified that they went out. So licensors should be prepared to answer questions, or at least to direct folks the right places if licensees have questions. Then we deployed the actual survey on October 1st. So DCYF is working with our partners, Western Washington University, once again on this survey. So they sent out those communications. Hopefully the email that DCYF sent out on September 29 primed providers to see that message and understand that it was coming from DCYF partner and trust it. Then on October 5th, I think this past weekend, Western Washington University sent out physical letters to providers to let them know about the survey as well. So in the original email on October 1st, there's a link. In the physical letters, there's a QR code. Most of our providers are filling out the survey online. Then in a couple weeks, we're going to send out postcard reminders. And then what happens is we start to monitor what our response rate is looking like and start to call phone call providers that haven't responded yet to encourage them to do so, offer support in doing so. And at that point, there's opportunity to actually do the survey over the phone, although it's still a lot more time efficient to do it online. So Western Washington University is available to support with that. We'll do some reminder emails at the beginning of next month. And then, depending on response rate, there's likely to be another set of call throughs to try to catch any providers that haven't filled out the survey. This allows us, if we wrap up before the holidays, we can start drafting the survey report in January. Now that the legislature has mandated the timeline on which we complete this survey, that makes it a legislative report, which makes it subject to a pretty lengthy internal review. So we need pretty much all of spring to review this before we publish, and that'll be on June 1st, 2026. So those are some of the timelines. I see a comment from Jen in the chat. You may cover this, but do we have an indication as to survey participation so far? I completed it yesterday and it was easy and straightforward. Wow, that's really great news. Thank you for completing it, Jen. I'm going to have my first update on official numbers to share at the end of this month. And so I'll make sure Provider Supports, ELAC, and IPEL all have that official update. Right now it's still early days. In our first day, we had over 100 folks participate. So, that was a good sign, but really way too early to have any indication of how we're doing. But I hope at the end of the month, we'll start to have a pretty good sense. Most folks will have participated by that point. So I'll let y'all know how it's looking at that time. Heidi asked, we have military providers in our area that are licensed by the military, some also licensed, but are payment only. So certified for payment only programs are not included because their licensing standards, their whole licensing system is by another entity. And so therefore the program model can differ pretty substantially. So we're only surveying folks who are certified, meaning those tribal programs where DCYF licensors go out and certify that if they were subject to licensing standards, they would have met them. So the answer to that question is no. Yeah. So I probably only have a few minutes left here. On this last slide, there's always opportunity for more feedback. And I see your follow-up there, Heidi. If the programs are licensed, they should have received the survey, but not those that are certified for payment only. And if you have any, suggestions for outreach at this point, of course, we're all ears, and I'm happy to hear that. Any suggestions on how we can help providers to spread word about the survey, certainly interested in that as well. And then looking forward to the report. If you have taken a look at the 2024 report recently or remember some takeaways from it, if you have suggestions on how to improve it, definitely interested to hear that as well. So, Senator Wilson, I see your hand.
Yeah, I was just curious if there's any like social media posts or anything that you could share that perhaps could go out on, I don't know, like my social media page, if it's connected to a piece of legislation and would support gathering information. Just curious whether that's something, because I know the survey itself, you want to be really careful on what, but as far as just reminding folks or asking folks if they're licensed and haven't been connected, if there's some kind of messaging that could be shared, that could be something, and could ask others, like Senator Alvarado perhaps, to put that also, Senator Stanford, on their social media pages, because it connects with the work, happening around true cost of quality and stuff. Just a wonder, and would be happy to do that myself, should something like that be available.
Sure, and I don't know if there is, if we've done that yet. If not, then I will follow up on that and see that we do, and then provide links and ways to connect to that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Matt, there's one more question in the chat from Jan. Did you say what percentage of participation you hope to get prior to closing the survey and starting the report?
Yeah, so historically we've hovered at around 50% usually, and that's kind of the goal we reach for. Last time our percentage was significantly lower because of mostly because of issues with the survey itself and school age providers completing. So if we were to get close to 50%, that would be a really positive outcome.
Sorry, can I ask one more question?
You bet.
So how is it going out? Is it like on what kind of a platform is it sitting? I live in an area where we're largely family home providers, and many of them have challenges with technology. And so I'm just curious of how that might be going out and how we can support getting those providers submitting.
So the survey can be taken on a desktop or cell phone. It's a Qualtrics survey that's optimized for both. And then we're sending out links and then QR codes. And then finally, for folks that you are able to complete the survey by phone if you want to. So that's a possibility. I think that takes substantially more time, but always a possibility for folks who don't have access to technology or would prefer not to use it. And then finally, you weren't probably alluding to this too, but some center programs have lots and lots of sites, and filling out 12 surveys is not practical for them at all. So Western Washington University uses a spreadsheet, and that's actually a lot simpler for those programs to do it. So we have a couple of different ways. And then with the communications, there's a technical assistance line that Western Washington University includes there, and they're pretty responsive and helpful to folks who might be having technical issues. Yeah, I see a comment from Elizabeth about librarians helping with tech support. Yeah, so the survey itself, once you get in, I hope, I mean, I'm speaking for myself, but I think it's fairly self-explanatory, and you could get on any computer with a browser and navigate to the link provided. The one thing that I think is important is having the material available with you to answer the survey. You know, all the rates and some of the wage information from some of your staff is one of the things that's necessary really to complete the survey. And then if you don't complete the survey, that's okay, but you want to be on the same browser and going back to it. So that's one thing, is if you're using a public computer, in order to complete a survey that hasn't been completed, to resume it, I think you need to be on that same computer doing it again. So Jan, is the survey only being distributed via email? So the principal way that folks have completed it in the past has been online through the link. And so we're sending emails. And so the answer is mostly yes, but the postcard and letters also have QR codes that go to the same link. So there is physical mail that's happening. So that's the other way. And then, as I mentioned, as we're seeing the providers that haven't participated yet, we'll start doing phone calls to folks using information that they provided DCYF for their contacts. And so that's another way that we sometimes get in touch with folks. But by far, most folks are completing by online from the email, I would imagine.
No, thank you. I mean, I'm just thinking of some that may not even open up their email. So if it's going out via the mail as well, that's wonderful. Thanks for that clarification. I do recall now the postcard bullet.
You know, lastly, Matt, there was a question early on about military providers. I think it was Heidi. She had a question regarding certified military providers being included in the survey. Have they been included or no?
So if the provider is licensed by DCYF, then they are. But if the military provider is certified by Department of Defense or licensed by them, then no. So we only certify those providers essentially where DCYF is doing licensing activities, whether they're licensed or certified. Hope that was clear. It can be confusing because we have certified for payment only and certified. So we only do certified.
Okay, is there any other questions for Matt today? Good, good. Well, thank you, Matt. That was really great and really great questions again, everyone. We're going to move on. I'm going to now introduce Heather West, who's going to be giving us an update on licensing division. As a reminder, during the presentation, please type your questions or comments into the chat box. Once the presentation is over, we will answer all type questions as well as open for any additional questions from the presenter. So we are excited to hear from Heather, who's with Workforce Project Initiative Administrator. She will share a preview of several initiatives the licensing division is working on to improve services. She'll highlight key topics and invite members to provide input on which areas should be prioritized for discussion at the next joint ELAC and provider services meeting in December. Again, your feedback will directly help shape the December's meeting and agenda. So feel free to be forthcoming. Thanks. And with that, I'm going to pass it on.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Yes, hello everyone. My name's Heather West, and I'm really happy to be here. I'm newer in my role here, so I hope to see you more and more here in the next in the upcoming meetings. But I have been around in the childcare licensing field for quite a while, and so these particular updates are really exciting for me to be here to share with you. As mentioned, so my goal here really is to provide a preview of what we will present on in more detail in December. So I do want to also share the opportunity that we want to see and hear from you on your questions and comments on these topics. So we won't necessarily answer the questions today, but that input really will help us organize our presentation around what you would like to know more about. So do keep those coming into the chat and share them forward. All right, so as part of our internal commitment to building our strong relationships with the provider community and our mission to supporting children, youth, and families, LD's always exploring ways we can improve our practice and ways we can improve our systems. Over this past year, LD is really engaged in several efforts to implement a more strength-based approach to our work by centering our practice around what we refer to as collaborative compliance. So collaborative compliance is not just about meeting the rules. It's really an approach that recognizes that providers are experts of their facilities and knowledgeable about what would work best for the programs and those they serve. Collaborative compliance, we see that as being achieved when licensors and providers engage in creative conversations around how to meet the intent of the WAC and as always, child safety. This approach supports providers in identifying ways they will comply with meeting that intent of the WAC. and also how they feel their approach can and their practice can meet the developmental and cultural needs of children and youth in care. So internally, we also know that collaborative compliance, it's not just about what happens at a site visit. It's not just during a visit. It's also about how we take the input that's received from our provider community and how we explore ways we can streamline our processes and improve our services. So how are we currently applying this into our practice? These on the slide here are some of those areas that I'm just going to highlight here. So over the past year in particular, but really over the past couple years, we've been looking at not only our WA Compass system, but also the practice. So when we look at our practice, we also look at what training we have for licensing staff. So we have a very robust library of training and resources that are available to licensing staff when they join the licensing team and that are always accessible. So recently we built upon that and have expanded that to include training around a strength-based approach and ongoing activities and events internally to also strengthen how we have that understanding and foundation around collaborative compliance. We're also, the next item here is streamlining monitoring visit checklists. So LD has really devoted a lot of intentional efforts towards looking at ways we could streamline these checklists. And this was really in response to input that has been received from providers and licensors over time. You know, that comment about the length of the visit and also the time it takes to complete a licensing checklist, because has been very lengthy. We also wanted to address the concern of duplicate citations. So we looked at how many times the same topic was addressed on the checklist, and we explored ways we could streamline that. We also reviewed checklist items that are rarely or never cited or were not directly related to health and safety. So something, for example, like measuring your window. A window doesn't change over time, right? Do we need to measure it every monitor visit? No, unless you get new windows, then that's a new thing that we would explore, right? So really looking at what is on the checklist. Is it focused on child safety and focused on things that matter most? And where are areas that we can remove certain pieces that might not be as relevant to explore or inspect at a monitor visit? We also reevaluated the different versions of the monitor checklist. So back when we had the current WAC that we work with now, the design of the checklist was intended to have rotational versions, and so that every WAC could be explored and technical assistance could be provided to the provider over the course of 4 years, so that every piece could actually be supported through conversation and also inspected for compliance. So we've been, that has been in place for quite a while. So what we wanted to do and what we did was we went back and reevaluated those versions and the effectiveness. What did that show? So ultimately, all those things combined, the result of all of that we looked at has allowed us to streamline the checklist down to one annual monitoring visit checklist that focuses on those 12 core federal health and safety requirements that our CCDF requires. It also focuses on the topics in RCW that are mandated by the legislature for us to inspect, and also really ultimately supports our DCYF mission and vision. So our WA Compass team is currently, like actively right now, working to make those changes in the system so that licensing staff can use that new streamlined checklist starting November. So that's pretty amazing, and that was a huge lift internally, and so that will be accessible for licensors to use come November. So another change is also the WA Compass provider portal. So LD's also presently working on programming another change in WA Compass, and particularly the provider portal as it relates to annual compliance. So the new functionality will allow providers to upload documents directly into the system. So this change was in response, it was implemented in response to what we heard from providers who expressed, difficulty. I mailed those in. My licensor hasn't received it. I emailed that. And so this provides a streamlined point of contact where providers can upload that information directly into the system. And that change will reduce that need for mail or emailing documentation. So hopefully the intent there is also to save time for providers in that process. In doing so, the system also will automatically record, do like sort of a timestamp of the date and time that those were submitted into the system for review. So also helps to eliminate confusion on when that paperwork was submitted or received. So, a lot of things are currently in motion. Some will be more in place. Like I said, that new streamlined checklist will be available for licensors to begin using in November. But other dates and other rollouts will be messaged through our communications messaging to keep you in the know. All right, so I hope that excited you, and that we'll see you all in December to learn more about those topics.
There are a couple of questions in the chat. Look like one from Laura. Our licensure is required to complete the training and provide proof of the completion to the admin.
Laura, can you expand on your question a little bit so I can know for December how we might want to focus
Yeah,
on?
I sit on the board with WCCA, and we regularly are meeting with DCYF. And one thing that I mentioned to Travis is that in the field across our state, it seems like there's inconsistencies with licensors. And so I was wondering if there's any like generalized, I know you said that there's a bunch of trainings in the library, but do they have to complete them? Do they need to provide proof of the training, and are they being completed so that there's some equal training across our state, and are they being held accountable to meet those training requirements?
I think Travis is here. I will say, as far as the training, we have e-learning training modules that are part of everyone's onboarding training plan, and those are recorded in our LMS training system. So once they're completed, it's recorded in the system. So there isn't really a report to admin for anything that's required. There is a transcript and a record for licensing staff in our system, internal learning management system. And then there's also additional training activities and webinars that are provided. And many times the webinar, if a webinar is taking place, it will collect attendance and then submit the attendance so that that is also whoever attended those events, those webinars, are also credited in our learning management system to capture that.
Laura, the short answer to that, Heather, you did an amazing job explaining that. And this is Heather's wheelhouse. Yes, there is required training that our staff have to do and keep up on, and it's managed by a system. And actually, right now, we're doing annual reviews. So supervisors are looking at all that information right now and making sure folks are up to date.
Yeah, that would just be helpful with equity for providers in the field, that we all have consistency. So thank you for that.
Yep.
Could I ask a question about this too? I'm loving the idea of the streamlined checklist, and thank you for doing that. But I'm wondering about things like, I'll use the example of one of my staff had their food handler's permit in their possession when a licensor was there, and it came up because it wasn't documented in merit, but because we could prove that she had it, why did then the licensor still have to write it up on the compliance report when it was, you know, simple, or those kinds of things happen frequently where, or like there's a rug that's got some strings that are hanging off of it, and a provider was able to pull out another rug that was, and fix the problem right then and there. Why did that still have to get written up on their compliance report? Those are things that are impacting in the long term, are coming up on insurance review, and then causing more. So how do you address in your training those kinds of things? Like, are they allowed to not write something up if it was fixed instantly, even though it was an infraction that they identified?
Travis, do you want to take that question?
Sure. What I would say is that it's the new strength-based model. It's the new approach that we're going to do with collaborated compliance. And I think what you're going to feel is the difference in monitoring, right? So Susan, you bring up a great example, right? Food handler's card, the paper copy's in hand, but it's not put in the system. That's silly, right? You're in compliance, that you're meeting the intent of the WAC. And so I believe this new model will allow us to see that and actually address those is really what it is. So
And what is the proceed? What is the how would we address it if we're not seeing that shift as you're saying it? How would we bring that? What's the process to draw attention to it so we can start to begin to change, I guess, behaviors out in the field?
Yeah, one area is asking for a review, right? So if you feel like you were meeting the intent of that WAC, and I know that doesn't help you right there in that moment, but the more of those that go to staff and we review them and have the discussion, then the consistency then will roll out to the field, right?
And then will those things that get identified or flagged that way come off of the compliance report if it was deemed to be kind of one of those, as you said,
if it's overturned? Yes, it would then come off. Yeah.
Just to add to that, just to add to this, and I know this is just one example, and the topic on training will be addressed in December. So certainly, if you have more inquiries like this, do put them in chat, send them forward so that we can, tailor our content in December around those specific areas. But I will say too, so just even on, let's just say, documentation of training, for example. So there are WACs on you must have and meet the compliance with, just with this example, food handlers, right? And then there's also a separate WAC item, right, in WAC that talks about where the documentation must be updated or stored. And so if, for example, on the checklist, it has two different items focusing on food handlers, and one meets compliance but the other doesn't, that could feel like a duplicate citation, right? This is also part of what we looked at when revising that checklist, is what makes sense. What are we looking for when we're out on the visit? And how can we, like, what WAC truly focuses our attention, or WAC, grouping, which would include like 1 A, B, C, for example, would truly meet the intent of what we're required or what we need to inspect on that for that particular thing. So I'm hoping too that part of that question, you know, or those types of examples might also be addressed with the changes that were made to the checklist to help streamline that. So not saying it's going to solve everything, but our intent really was for situations like that too, to focus on something that really is more of like, hey, do you meet the food handler's requirement? There you go. So, Senator Wilson.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to mention, you know, we have a budget proviso right now with the Office of the Insurance Commissioner just because of the costs of the premiums and also carriers not wanting to carry childcare. And I think one of the conversations was also the language and the actual words that are used on the website. So when an insurance carrier goes and looks to see what a licensed childcare provider potentially has been found to be out of compliance on, there are many of those things that are a screw out of place or a hook that was too high or too low. And again, things that were immediately fixed. And so I think the other thing we need to do is look at the language we're using on the website and things that are public facing or things that are sent out, because they are also impacting what one sees as risk. And many of these things, clearly quality and risk are hugely important when we're talking about the care of other children and any child. And at the same time, I think semantics and words mean everything. And it also would behoove us to look at how we are, what we're calling whatever is an infraction or a finding, if you will, because sometimes it is not a red flag. It's just, where is it? I couldn't find it. And it's not that it wasn't there. It was not perhaps where it should have been. Anyway, just something that's come out in the conversations I've been having, in particular related to risk and the cost right now of insuring and paying premiums. Thanks.
Thank you for that feedback. Laura.
Just one more thing I wanted to mention. So we just had our recent directors meeting in my area, which is Yakima, Washington, and licensors and the supervisors were there. And I mentioned the topic of insurance and how important those write-ups are. And they weren't aware that providers were facing an insurance crisis right now. So I'm just wondering if you guys are educating licensing teams about, you know, the vulnerable position we're in with small things causing us to lose our insurance and raise rates. My rates went up from $8,000 a year to $20,000 a year, and I've never had a claim. I've been licensed 26 years, and we hear of many providers losing their insurance over any sort of a write-up. So.
I appreciate the question and bringing that topic up. That is, I know, in discussion. I don't know, Travis, if you have any updates to share on that at this time, but
I don't have any updates. I know that it's an issue. It's been brought to my attention, Ruben's attention. We've had a lot of conversations about it. I don't have an answer today. Little curious why Yakima staff weren't aware of it, because we've actually heard it from staff across the state too. So maybe it just hasn't impacted Yakima, and that's the first time that they're hearing that. So, but I have definitely heard it from staff across the state, from the field.
And I do want to just address, I know there's several really curious people to see that checklist, and that's amazing. Right now, it's still being fully programmed into the system. We don't have it available for release. It will be made available on the website. And more to come also in that presentation. Lois, it's nice to see your name again. It's been a long time.
Yeah, it's good to see you too. Glad to see you're doing well. I had a question in the chat, but I know sometimes it's easy to miss that when you're presenting. So I just want to point your attention to it, or I can just share it. I just wanted to know about the checklist. Will it be shared for feedback? You just talked about that a little bit, but I was suggesting that maybe at the December joint meeting might be a place to get feedback from during breakout groups, especially since it'll be ELAC and provider support. I also want to point out that I think all this is really great, but that a lot of times providers, we can be cited for not having our information updated in merit. However, a lot of times the licensing information is out of date. And so just want to bring that up in this meeting, that it's important for, just as we are held accountable for up-to-date information, that DCYF should be as well.
Thank you, Lois. Okay, well, remember, you can keep submitting your questions and your comments or inquiries on what we can do to really center our presentations in December. We will have some other speakers. It won't just be me. So you'll have more experts. And I do see Travis, you have your hand up as well. I'll hand it to you to wrap it up.
I just wanted to respond a little bit to what Lois comment. Actually, we've taken a lot of feedback from providers. Actually, this group, provider support, with all of that feedback of the changes that they wanted to see with the checklist. So the one thing that I would say is kind of wait till we get to December to be able to share that. And yes, we'll take feedback, and if we need to make adjustments, but we've taken quite a bit of feedback on this checklist, and I want folks to take a look at it first, because I think you're going to appreciate what we've done. I think we found some common ground here is what we've done. So let's wait till December and see what it is. Love to hear your feedback, but I think you guys are going to appreciate what we've done, just so you know.
Hey, Travis, but are you open to having maybe Lois or a few other people just give it a test run to look at it before the December meeting? Because I think sometimes when things come back, they're basically fully baked rather than partially baked. And I think that's it would be an opportunity now that we're given the feedback, but we didn't see what it looks like. So can we have a look at what it looks like before it gets presented in its formal way, just to see if there's any other tweaks that need to be made?
Unfortunately, we're too far down the road. And we have to be in compliance with the feds is what we're trying to meet with this checklist. And that's kind of our checks and balance here for this, is that if we meet what the feds are saying, it is kind of what we're going off of. This is our checklist that we regulate folks to. So I don't know if there's room for feedback here. I'm just going to be transparent and honest, and I think that we're too far down the road to make changes at this time. But like always, we will take feedback in the future. So
then in December, Travis, will you also bring what those federal requirements are so we can see what they are and how they match up to the checklist?
Yep.
Perfect.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
We already got a sheet that we're making that you can cross-reference to be able to look why we chose the wax that we did and justifying the health and safety stuff from the feds.
That's really helpful, because then we don't have to try to look it up.
Yep. Yeah. That's why I'm saying, Susan, give us a chance. You've been asking for this, and I think I think we're there.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
I do want to put in one final plug, and it's not on the slide, but I know it's top on your list. You want to know more about it, is that monitor visit survey. We still are, as per what we provided in the feedback loop, we're still in that first year of data collection. So we're not prepared yet to provide that analysis of what that looks like. But my plug is, please help spread the word, encourage folks as much as you can to submit those. So once those email surveys are received after a monitor visit, please send encourage people to fill them out, share their input, because we do want to hear about that experience. And that is also going to help us inform other future areas where we can not only look at areas of improvement, but what are things that are strengths? Where do people find that does work really well? So we can do more of that too. So we want to hear from you. So that's what that's out there for. Please help spread the word. We want to see those numbers rise. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you both, Heather and Travis. That was really good information. I'm myself am excited to hear about the streamlining efforts taking place. So good stuff. Again, as we conclude, remember to share feedback via the meeting reflection survey for this topic, which is in the chat. If you haven't taken the time, please fill out the reflection survey. This helps collect feedback and improve our work. Also, if you haven't provided your input on what you'd like to see and hear from ELAC in 2026, please take the work plan survey, which is also in the chat. Our next public meeting will be a joint meeting with Provider Services Subcommittee, which will be Tuesday, December 16th. And I just want to thank you all for today and wish you a very prosperous day and week. And with that, the meeting is adjourned, unless there's anything else. Great. Thank you all.